Hey guys, welcome to Boardnail's television reviews, and on this video I will be reviewing the 6th episode of HBO and BBC's production version of His Dark Materials, and this is episode 6 and it is called the Deamon-Cages. Not quite sure why it's called that, but anyway, I guess to describe what the children are being held in. At the end of last week's episode, Lyra and her spirit demon or demon were kidnapped and taken to this sort of random sort of centre with like scientists, and it soon became apparent to Lara that it was the same place as Billy had been taken, where he was separated from his demon. So this is obviously the centre where the children have been going, and you've been having these weird sort of experiments. So over the course of this episode, Lyra finds out, exactly what has been happening, what the gobblers have been doing to the children, and that, for most of the episode she seems to be in store for the same fate. She, of course, is using a fake name. She's going under Lizzie as a sort of a cover. And we find out, they're doing like these long-term experiments on children involving dust. That, they're hoping, they're sort of basically sacrificing children in the hope that these experiments will become recognised by the main government, and that they'll be, hailed and all that sort of jazz. And that they'll be, in their eyes, they're sort of expanding science and new discoveries, and that's worth the price. But there is this sort of back and forth. One of the scientists is very hesitant throughout the episode about what they're actually doing and is it worth it. But pretty much all the episode is based at this centre. It's quite a nice little tight, confined sort of episode where we get to know more about what's been happening to the children. But it's quite a simple little premise for this episode, and it works really effectively. I like the look of the centre itself, the very sort of cold and clinical sort of looking colours, and really nice design. It really stands out visually, and quite a tense little episode as the stakes are slowly raised and Lyra tries to plot her escape along with the other children. Almost turns into a siege-like plot at the end, so I'll talk a bit more about that. But Lyra, when she's been taken through, because they've got like this dining hall type room, and she notices Roger is there. Of course, that's where he's been taken. But at first, she has to pretend that she doesn't know Roger, that they don't know each other for their own safety, and then they start to slowly hatch a plan. And what they do is they see one of the girls get called away into like the room, this girl Bridget, and she's very hesitant, but we see her being led into like this room by the main sort of doctor and scientists, and we just hear the sound. We hear the mechanical sound and her sort of screaming, so we know that something bad is happening to her, that she's being drained, and obviously she's being separated from her demon, which, as we know from what happened to Billy, it ultimately leads to you dying. So again, we're going into some pretty dark places in this episode. So that's obviously for Lyra, it's an alarm bell. And I remember early in the episode where she's sort of having tests on her by like the doctor. I know she's asking lots of questions. So again, Lyra very inquisitive, very much on the ball, trying to get as much information as possible. But later on, they have a fire alarm test, and that's because of this like experiment that's been done on this girl Bridget. So it seems like it's almost a comment on every time you have one of these like massive sort of experiments, you're using up a lot of technology, you're using a lot of energy. So because it's commented on by the doctor at one point, you know, we have to keep having these things after we've done one of these tests. So they all huddle outside, and that's kind of when Lyra talks to Roger, and they, you know, they're whispering sort of thing and plotting their plan. And again, I think this sort of is capturing like the adventure type thing, the kind of youthful rebellious angle, because she starts throwing like random snowball, because it's, you know, snowing outside and stuff. She starts throwing snowballs at like the one who's doing like the assembly, and then Roger does the same, and gradually all the children start doing it. So it causes this chaos, and that's when Roger and Lyra sort of funnel off, and they start looking around the whole complex, and that's when they get to like this room where the children are in there and they're separated from their demons, and we see them getting really weak. So this puts into motion Lara's plan that they'll set off like a fire alarm, and then that'll lead them to planning their escapes, basically. But there's another term, which is then Miss Coulter comes to the facility. So the next morning they wake up and they realise they're in the air, that they're on like one of those, you know, balloons we've seen, balloon crafts. I forget the name now, but they're up in the air, and it's because Miss Coulter has come for a visit. So she's very much in charge and keeping an eye on these operations, and is, you know, come for a visit. And of course she's Lyra's mother, as we found out previously. But Lyra, because she knows Miss Coulter is looking for her and is worried about why she's looking for her, she doesn't want her to know she's there, and obviously she's going under a different name, so she kind of hides under the bed when Miss Coulter comes in for an inspection. And is, you know, Lyra's been trying to get the rest of the children on board with her plan for them to escape. But then at dinner, Lyra is called into the room, and she does her best to sort of escape. She kind of like runs off in the, but then they capture her demon, and that makes her weaker. So it's this really intense scene, because she's loaded into like the machine, and she's screaming and begging, and she starts screaming, you know, I'm Mrs. Coulter's daughter, you know, so obviously desperate times and all that, so she's bringing that up. And Miss Coulter is still in the facility, so she comes in and she basically saves Lyra. She realises it's Lyra, and it's a shock for her, because she doesn't know that Lyra knows that she's her daughter at this point. So, but she calls it off and says let her go. And I think, so we have a conversation between Lyra and Miss Coulter. Miss Coulter gives like this feeble sort of excuse in a way about why she sort of gave Lyra up, or why she wasn't part of her life as when she was younger. And she says it wasn't because I didn't care, it's more because Lord Astrael, you know, he had his own plans, his own ideas, and I just thought it was easier to go along with them. But it's a pretty flimsy excuse, but it kind of works for the sort of character she is, and it works for the scene, but I think the scene sort of touches on some of the politics again that the story's going for, because Miss Coulter's trying to justify the experiments on the children and stuff and the bigger picture, but she's kind of saying to Lyra, nothing's going to happen to you because you're different, you're special. And there is a line about, it's about saving the many and, rather than the few. I mean, it's almost bordering on like the Star Trek sort of quote, but yeah, it's that sort of thing. So it's getting into the whole idea of the politics behind some of the ideas of the story, and obviously she's very steadfast, very determined, and she's not that way inclined. She does look at the morality that each life matters, and that it's just wrong to be doing this to children and anybody, no matter how you try to justify it. And I do like actually the fact that there's this questioning of the staff there, because we find out later that one of the nurses, she originally was separated from her demon, and she was forced to become a nurse, to become part of this sort of process. We're not explained exactly what happened to her, but I think you can see then a couple of people working at the facility, including her, have their doubts. Even though she corners Lyra at one point, she does have her doubts. And, when Lyra comes back at her and, says about it makes you weak losing your demon, and she almost, without saying so, sort of agrees with what Lyra's sort of saying, and she kind of allows Lyra to escape. But Lyra sort of tricks Mrs. Coulter, because Miss Coulter knows that Lyra has the device which was given to her by the dean of the boarding school, and she wants that, and Lyra sort of tricks her because she gives it to her, but then there's like a booby trap sort of on it, and then she runs and locks the door. And I do like this scene, the energy of it, because basically Miss Coulter and Lyra both scream at once. So like mother like daughter sort of thing, but there's just this energy. Again, really good performances from these two actresses. Again, Ruth Wilson and obviously Daphne Keane. And it all escalates here, so it sets in motion their plan to escape. And that's when, Maggie, Ma, and John and the rest show up, that they've found their way to the base. And they crash, emerge, and basically you get this kind of big battle for a couple of minutes. So it does turn into sort of a siege type movie for like a couple of minutes, which is pretty cool. And Maggie actually kills a guy. She kills like the scientist, the guy who's kind of had his doubts, and she confronts him, and he sort of says, I didn't know, I was forced, because of course she's upset over what happened to Billy, and she actually kills him. She squeezes his neck, twists his neck the wrong way, and kills him. It's a really violent moment, but you really feel Maggie's rage, and there's this full battle for like these couple minutes. And it looks like actually they're going to win, like the other side, because they're sort of saying, they're basically like saying, make sure Lyra's safe, but kill the rest. But then the witch scoops in, Sarah scoops in, bit of CGI here, but she scoops in, uses her magic and saves everyone. So that's kind of the turning point. And Lyra and I forget his name now, the cowboy sort of Scott. His name will come back to me, but you know the fellow I mean, and obviously Lyra, the polar bear, that they all escape, and they're now on a mission to save Lord Asriel, so they're on like an airship, the aeronaut character. Meanwhile, Maggie and the rest have stayed behind to look after the rest of the children and guide them to their homes, even though they're not quite sure if their families will want them back. But that's kind of what they're doing. But then there's because the episode has this kind of slow ending where you think, well, it's all going a bit too positive. Something's gonna happen before we end, and it does. They're up in the ship, and suddenly these really tense atmosphere again. These demon creatures start attacking the ship, the side of the hot air balloon, and it actually ends with Lyra struggling, and she falls down. She falls off the craft through the skies, and I mean, it looks like she could be dead, but of course she's not gonna be dead. But that's how it ends. So really dramatic ending once again, and another good episode. That's episode 6 of His Dark Materials. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below if you've seen it. Like and subscribe, all that stuff. More TV reviews to come soon. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.